All right. So that's all the moment awards. We're going to go to the org awards, which is a relatively short category. There's only, 5 awards? But a lot to talk about, I think, because we're going to be talking about completely new stuff. All right, let's start with Best Org Twist. This is the twist this year that people found the most captivating. There's a lot of good nominees for this. I think the one I gravitate towards most is Anomalies from Variations on a Theme.
Yo, that's what I was gonna pick as well.
Yeah, I just think it's such a good idea. Like, the way Pseudo introduced me to the concept when he was initially brainstorming the org was he wanted to come up with a way to resolve the issue of people being able to, like, completely outpractice their opponent, while also having some level of assurance that the DMs that he presents aren't going to be solved or broken. And I think it does that in a really interesting way. You can still practice and you can still...
I think it mostly works.
Yeah, I think you can still prepare, but it has the perfect balance between being able to prepare and there being some element of adaptation and surprise. So, I don't know. I really liked it, and I think the other thing that really works in its favor is a lot of the anomalies that he did end up using and designing were really good. A lot of the anomalies I felt were very impactful and had, pretty significant impact on how the game ends up being played. Like, we talked about the Crossfire anomaly that basically makes the game far more psych. There's a few other Crossfire ones that I think are really fun. There's the one that's like shove that changes, like, it's not parallel, it's the L's, and I think that one's really funny.
Yeah, I think anomalies are really, really good. I think as someone that played that org, I think it's kind of a testament that 4 out of 5 of the DMs, in my opinion, were very, very good with the anomalies. And even that 5th DM was, like, fine. It wasn't, like, terrible, but it was not as good as it could have been, I think.
Is this Night Fight?
So they worked very, very well. Yeah, it's Night Fight.
Mm-hmm.
I think Night Fight is, like, it went from an unsalvageable game, well, not unsalvageable, kind of a bad game, to a decent one. So, like, it still helped, in my opinion.
It kind of felt like some of these games were meant to be played with at least one
with
anomaly.
anomalies.
Yeah,
that's true.
but yeah, I feel like anomalies are like expansion packs for the base game DM, I'm also a big fan of shards. I think
shards are cool.
I think, like, this is probably the best, like, way to kind of almost replicate the idea of a hidden immunity idol from Survivor. Without being too overpowered, I think the idea of partially filled out tokens that you can fill out with your own shards and objectives that kind of reward you by giving you shards throughout the main match. I love that concept. I just wish there's, like, a few more dodge spots by design, because usually it's like only like one person dodging,
right?
And I feel like more often than not, the risk reward is very skewed to you completing the token every single time. Whereas if maybe 2 or 3 people got to dodge, like, there's still danger. You're still incentivized to play it safe and fill out your token with your shards. But who knows? Like, you are also kind of, like, incentivized to maybe be greedy and hold on to your shards. That's just my issue with the execution. Other than that, I really love the concept. I don't know. Shards are cool.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's by far the most elegant currency design we've had. I think Genius Orgs have struggled with coming up with a Garnet replacement, because after some experimentation, I think a lot of us agree that Garnets are pretty difficult to balance and introduce in a meaningful way. They either feel really overpowered or completely useless.
I also want to say, like, it's not just that you every, like, token, like, requires 4 shards to complete. And but it's not just that if you have 8 shards, you automatically have 2 tokens. You still have to, like, win a, like, 0 out of 4 token in the main match.
Correct.
There's still that prerequisite of having to play the main match and do well enough, which makes it balanced, in my opinion. All right, moving on.
I agree. I do want to give a shout out to Contracts too. I think Contracts is really in service of shards more so than anything else. But I like the idea of having side quests in a main match that you have to complete for some reward.
I agree.
I think it adds a lot of dynamic play to the main match, because even if you're guaranteed to win, right, for some reason or another, you have incentive to maybe go out and try some other
or the
things.
opposite.
Or the opposite, yeah. If you're guaranteed to lose,
in my case,
you still have incentive to try some things so that you can get some benefit out of the main match, right? I think it encourages people to still actively play the game. And I think that's always a good thing to do, even if someone is, trying not to engage with it.
Yeah, I'm in agreement.
How do we feel about variations? Do we think they're worse than anomalies?
Yeah, I mean, they're not like bad. It's just like I didn't think they made as big an impact on like my experience of the games.
Yeah, I think variations just by nature are relatively low impact because they only last for a round each, whereas anomalies last for the entire deathmatch.
Yeah, that's fair. I thought it was like a neat thing to do.
Yeah.
But I do agree that it's probably low impact. It's a good twist, but I don't know if it's the best twist,
I think it I think it's fine as like a one-off twist. I think it kind of limits the design space almost.
That's also fair. You have to come up you have to come up with all these different variations for each round. So it also means that the game has to be round based too. So
yeah.
Okay, let's move on to best org to spectate. The org this year that was the most engaging to follow and spectate. There's one that's kind of cheating. And then
it's gonna be. We can give it to Gambit Game, guys. Come on.
I don't care. I'm giving it to Gambit Game. Like, how often are you going to have like an org that like is fully produced, video recorded, edited, everything? Like, just fucking give it to Gambit Game. It never happens.
Yeah. I mean,
it's Gambit Game.
I do want to. Unfortunately, the text orgs just have to suffer because text orgs don't have the leisure of being edited and pruned down and produced like Gambit Game was. But I do think Nilnado was pretty interesting to spectate. I think it was pretty socially dynamic at times.
Yeah, I was gonna say we can break the tie between Nilnat and Nilnada. We can finally say which one is better. Resolve the dispute.
Which one do you
I think Nilnat was actually better to spectate.
Nilnat?
Yeah.
Really?
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
That's my take.
Okay. Do you want to explain?
Nilnata was a lot more interesting from a gameplay perspective because it felt like things were more in flux. But as for like events that were actually entertaining and like took my attention, Nilnat for sure was better.
The gold effect.
The gold effect. And honestly, even like some of the stuff Alara was doing was like interesting, even though she clearly had control for the entire time, like the entire game. Apart from Gold's various acts of bullshit. Yeah.
Where do you lie on this fence, X?
Well, I'm a Nilnada fan, but mostly because I was more invested in the cast of Nilnada.
Yeah.
And the success of like certain people in the cast.
I agree.
But I don't know. I think like there is something to what you're saying in that Nilnat has kind of a shit show sometimes. That's more engaging. Even like when it's not a shit show, like you can see someone like Alara just like orchestrating things in a way that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think at some point, probably in the early mid-game, I think it became fairly clear that Fruit had a pretty easy path. Like, there was a point where Nilnada became the Fruit and Uri show, right?
Yeah.
And I do think Nilnat was the Alara show, but the issue is Alara had gold, and shit would always go crazy, and like something would go wrong. And I think seeing things go wrong, there's some entertainment to that. How are they going to deal with this crazy thing? What is going to happen to... Like, I also thought Mist was fun to spectate. I thought Space and Pengu and Lettle also were all fun to spectate. Whimsilla is always a treat because he's always writing theses in his Thoughts channel. I just thought the cast had more dynamic play opportunity after a certain point because the other side was very much by design. It felt like Fruit was always winning.
Mm-hmm.
And to some people, that's really fun to watch because you're watching someone basically play like a chess grandmaster. And for some people, that's going to be boring because it's like, well, this one person is going to constantly win. you know?
Mhm.
So I can see an argument for both ways. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, nobody needs to make a choice because I think it is Gambit Game.
It is Gambit Game, yeah.
All right, let's move on to best org graphics and presentation. This is the org this year that had the best graphics and presentation. What was prettiest?
Okay, this one is also a gimme CO, in my opinion.
I agree.
I also agree. I do like the graphics of Contractual Obligation more than like Gambit Game. I think Gambit Game, like, its presentation is great, but that's because like the rules were presented in video form, reminiscent of like the show. But the graphics themselves are not as good as Contractual Obligations, like graphics. The images used, the assets, everything, I think Contractual Obligations are prettier to look at.
Mm-hmm.
I do like Gambit Game's graphical identity. Reese did spend I don't know how to pronounce his name. Is it Reese or Reese?
It's Reese.
It's Reese, right? Reese did spend a lot of time thinking of it, and I do think it looks good. But I do think Contractual Obligation is very pretty. It's very cute. It's very well done. And I think the important thing about Contractual Obligation is it uses its graphics and presentation to help the players understand the rules a lot better. Gambit Game has the advantage of having video rule sets, but sometimes those video rule sets can be a mouthful. The summary of the games for Contractual Obligation actively made my life easier.
Oh, they were so clutch.
Yeah. And I love Pseudo, and there's a lot of Vote stands in this call, but Vote's graphics are spreadsheets.
Yeah, no, I don't know why it was nominated.
I don't know why it's here. It is, it's fun spreadsheets. It is cute, but it is just spreadsheets. Yeah. They're all square grids or hex tiles. Like,
it's okay. It could have won in like 2020 or whatever.
And I do like the Zero's Guardians graphics, but it's a hardier. I do like Contractual Obligation and Gambit Game a lot better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the worry about AI art is definitely well-founded, and I understand if people don't want to vote for that. So, yeah, I think that's a pretty easy category for all of us. Contractual Obligations rule summaries really kind of clutch up here. I think this will also maybe be an easy category. Yeah. Best org finals.
Yeah.
We've spent so little time on this section compared to everything else. Like, we're
mostly for the best.
Best org finals. The org this year that had the most intense and engaging finals to watch. Dems versus Fruit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was 3 games. 3 pretty intense games, too. It had a narrative going into it. You had this big, bad social boss versus the underdog, both in terms of item count and also in terms of who people thought were likely to win. There's the game 1 upset. Really close game. Fruit makes a blunder, wastes an item, some mischief, and now you feel like, ooh, like, what's going to happen? Is Dems going to pull off the upset? But then Fruit wins 2 really close games back to back, clutches up, becomes the champion. Honestly, just great from every angle.
I'm surprised Mist versus Dems only ended in 2 games.
I do agree.
In my head, I had that as a 3-game series.
I think it was, I think Dems... Wait, wasn't it 3 games?
The sheet says 2.
I can check. Oh, yes. It was 2 games. Yep, it was just 2 games. I think both games were pretty close. I think.
Yeah, they were good games. I like the Mage's Ballad one.
Yeah. I don't think Gravity Pandemic was that close.
I'll trust you. You hosted that, right?
Well, I also don't remember. I'll check.
I do not remember it being close.
I remember the one I hosted, which was the Mage's Ballad one, was pretty good. Like, it was a
good game.
Yeah, I remember we stayed in call afterwards and like brainstormed what could have been done to have Dems win, etc., etc. So there was definitely quality theory.
Never mind, I stand corrected. It was close.
It was?
Oh, okay. Well, I guess what I was wrong.
No, it ended 3.25 to 0.5.
Wow.
But if you guess the Raven, that's 3 points. So it just came down to the last Raven, basically.
I see. Okay, I mean, I do think that finals is good. I think it is the second best finals, but it's the second best finals by a long shot.
Yeah.
I think Dems versus Fruit just takes the cake easily here.
Mhm.
Congratulations to Dems, I guess, involved in such great finals. You know, the weird one is I think Dems versus Pengu was technically eligible for this because the finals didn't happen.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's rough. What the fuck?
Yeah, and it didn't even get nominated.
That should have been nominated. I mean, I don't think it's winning, but it should have been nominated for sure.
I think it's better than Alex versus Grunkle, and I do want to give it a shout out. I think that was also a really closely fought game. I think especially, I mean, FM1 was kind of a meme. I think FM2, the Buck Conundrum, was pretty close.
Was FM2 the island one? Oh no, FM1 was the island one. Yeah, that one was a meme.
Yeah, FM1 was
Sorry,
a meme because Dems threw. FM2 was pretty close, but Dems beat Pengu, and then the final game came down to Pengu making a blunder. It was very, very close.
Yeah.
It was a strat game about making flowers. So I think that deserves a nomination, which means Dems just, I guess it's his ear.
It means Dems is in session.
True. I think we have another easy category coming up. We have Best Org for consistently good design. This is the org this year that had the most consistently good design throughout all its games. So all of its main matches, death matches.
Vote.
Yeah, vote, right?
Yeah, it's vote.
Yeah. I think vote, there is not a single game in vote that I thought was actively bad. Like, there were a few games that were misses for me personally, but I could see how some people could enjoy them. They were still playable. I think especially, I think of the Mafia game, the reframing game. I think both of those were a little bit of a miss for me personally, but still really good, still playable.
The only game that I thought was actively bad was Letter Auction, and apparently 2 of the F4 still really enjoyed it. So I guess even then, there are people that really like the games I did not like.
Mm-hmm. I cannot say the same for the other 2 orgs up for this award. I think Gambit Game is really well designed, but there are a few questionable games in there. I am personally not a fan of Line Gravity.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I think that game is a bit on the... It has a really strong advantage for one player. And I also don't really like All-In Goofspiel as a game. I think it often resolves to 50-50s.
Mm-hmm.
And it just comes down to one guess, right? It comes down to a coin flip, generally.
Yeah, and also a lot of the games from Gambit Game were reused from EM Genius.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's fair.
And I think Zero's Guardians does try a lot of innovative designs. I think it puts itself out there and tries new things at the risk of sometimes failing. And sometimes those risks really pay off. Sometimes they don't. But for an award called consistently good design, I do think Variations of a Theme deserves to be the winner here, because Guardians is pretty inconsistent in its design quality, at least for me personally. There are some really high highs and there are some lows, I think. That dice rolling game, I don't know how I feel about that one.
That was really funny though, so I think it is good design.
I like your criteria.
Yeah.
All right. I think we can wrap up that category really quickly. I think we can speed through the org awards. I don't think it will be very controversial at all.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we can say the same for the coming awards, because we're getting to the heavy hitters, right? We're getting to the Genius Awards, which is just the final section of like all the bests, right? All the cool awards that all the cool kids want. And we're going to start with Best Main Match of 2024. Straight up. Best Main Match. Any takers?
Okay, so my top 2 were Bouquet Arrangement from CO and Swap 61 from Vote. And after thinking a little bit more about it last night, I do think Swap 61 is the better game. It's just, I think a little bit... I don't know how to describe it. I just think it's a more enjoyable game, and it's a little bit more elegant as well, in my opinion. Like Bouquet Arrangement has like the guessing mechanic for fighter. If I remember exactly what you had to do, you had to like guess how many points you earned or something like that. And I don't know, it was a little bit unwieldy. I remember it having some problems. Or you specifically had issues with it, Mercer, I thought.
I just think it wasn't enough information. I think the main match tries its best to obscure any and all information as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it accomplishes it in a very good way. And the point guessing is just really finicky. I just didn't think it added much to the game. It was mostly useless information.
I agree. That's like something that holds the game back from like truly being the best of the year, even though everything else about the game is like really, really good in my opinion.
I agree.
And the worst thing I can say about Swap 61 is that it felt like there were certain rounds where I just really couldn't do much to help myself, and all I could really do is screw other people over. But even then, that still like affords you a good amount of agency. And I also felt like in those circumstances, I probably could have done something a round earlier to set myself up better. So yeah, Swap 61 is my choice for this award.
I think I'm in agreement. I think Swap 61 as a host and as a spectator was the most dynamic game to watch. So many different ideas and concepts, and the game facilitated all these different plans and alliances really, really well. I think it's also a really simple and elegant design. It doesn't really have any fat to it. The game is pretty difficult to wrap your head around simply because like longest shortest distance is kind of a mouthful. But otherwise the game is super elegant in its design. Every mechanic and even every variation I felt like served the purpose in enhancing what the game wanted the players to do. And I think it overall just creates a really fine product. It's very well designed.
It's one of the only main matches I've ever played that I wish was longer and had more rounds.
That is high praise.
I think
that is very high praise.
I think something you said earlier in the podcast kind of like stuck with me, in that like you said it is helpful to talk to other people and get them to cooperate with you, but it also only takes one person to fuck everything up.
Yeah.
I think that aspect of it makes it intriguing to me as someone who has never played it and didn't really spectate it that deeply.
Mm.
I think like it's not just the majority stomp, but social game in that game is not quite trivial either.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely not a majority steamroll game.
No, it's actually extremely difficult for a majority to steamroll. So I like those two. I think my personal vote is probably going to be for Swap 61. I do also really like Prepare or Despair. I think that game tries a lot of things. I think it is less elegant as a design, and at times it doesn't feel really main matchy, but it's super innovative. It takes a lot of risks, and pretty much all of those risks pay off. And I think that speaks to how well crafted and intentional a lot of the design is. So I do think it is a worthy nominee. I just personally prefer Swap 61 as a main match. So that's probably going to be my vote, but I do really like that game as well.
Yeah, I think I remember not liking one or two of the mini games for Prepare or Despair, but other than that, very, very good design.
Agreed.
I just want to give a shout out to U-Boat Shootout. I just think it's solid. I think the mechanics are nice. I think like the way it limits movement and the way it limits like where you can shoot, and the way it's generous with like the hitbox of your shots, makes it less random than you would think for a game where you're just like hiding in a submarine and you don't know where anyone is. I also think the island powers are pretty well designed. So overall, I just think it's solid. I also think it did its job for like a late game main match very well.
I agree. I mean, I think Final Four is not easy to design for, and I think U-Boat Shootout does tackle the design problem pretty well. I think it played out really well, and I do think the design is partially responsible for that. All right. Without further ado, let's move on to Best Deathmatch 2024. This is the best deathmatch from this year. Honestly, this is a pretty tough pool. I think there's a lot of good games here in terms of being peak DM design. I think we got a lot of games that really refine its category to its best. For example, I think Logical Horror is one of the best mental DMs we've ever seen.
Yeah.
I also think the vote games are pretty dang good games in terms of their own fields. Like I think Crossfire is probably the best like bidding calculation deathmatch we've had ever, right? Like we've seen this mechanic in so many different games where you have to like outbid your opponent to make a move. I think this is the best one.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah.
My personal favorite on the list is Crossfire, just because it looks like something I would play just like at a board game cafe or something.
Yeah.
Like I would go out of my way to play this on a good day.
Yeah, so as for my own vote, I think I might vote both Crossfire and Mitosis. They're both such good designs. I do think Crossfire is a more fun experience, but Mitosis is also more elegant, in my opinion, and a more innovative design, because it's so hard to make an abstract strategy game that feels original, and Stu did just that with Mitosis. So they're both amazing. Logical Horror, also an incredible game. It's just not my cup of tea. I would not be mad if it won.
Me personally, I think I'm a sucker for abstract games, and as a designer who loves trying to design abstract, I am just befuddled at how elegant and concise the Mitosis design is and how well it plays, and also that it's original on top of that.
Yeah.
I feel like so many abstracts fall into the trap of feeling pretty samey to another game, whether it's Gomoku or chess. This one is pretty completely original, and it's extremely well done. I'll probably be voting for Mitosis.
And then on the ZGD games, I like all of them. None of them really stuck out to me in the same way that the vote games did.
I'm kind of sad because like I'm a big fan of the concept of playthings of the past. I just don't like how it's executed.
How so?
Because I'm a big fan of chess likes, and I think just like summoning pieces that like moved in different ways, I think that's neat. I also like how there is some randomness, but it's still a chess like, you know, like the pieces that the pool of pieces that you are allowed to summon is kind of random, but you're still relying heavily on your tactics in the chessboard. But the game just drags on so long on average. I think some of the pieces have to work differently. Some of the mechanics might need some tweaking. But the concept, I just really love Playthings of the Past as a concept.
I think I really like the concept of what it's called, like Neo Chess likes or whatever it's called, where you play chess but with new pieces. And this is kind of in that vein. I just think it's a lot. I think there's a lot of rules. There's a lot of confusing things about the game. And it also has a tendency to drag on forever. I think the shortest game we had was what, like 2 hours and a half. It can go on for a while.
Average poker DM experience.
I think my favorite of the Guardians games is definitely the Ringed City. I think that design is fantastic.
I agree.
Super elegant. Honestly, another design that I'm like, oh, nobody's thought of something like this before, and nobody has. Super original, but also a lot of fun. And as we discussed earlier, I think it's a game that uses its luck elements extremely well. Like, the luck serves a purpose, and the game is about optimizing so that the luck doesn't matter. And it's just really good. It looks like it's fun to play. If I had like a minor gripe with the game, it's that the submissions is rather difficult. Like, the submission format. It's probably a game that plays better like in real life when you can actually throw dice and move pieces. Having to submit on Discord like 6 different things in a certain format is a lot, especially in 60 seconds. But I don't think that's like a mark against the design at all. I think it's still fantastic. It was fun to watch play out as well. So I guess we talked about almost all of these except Gravity Pandemic. I like Gravity Pandemic a lot. I think it's innovative. I think it does a lot of new things. It looks like it's fun to play, not to host. As someone who has hosted it, it was pretty tough. But I do think I don't know. It's hard to describe why I would like something like Mitosis more.
I think like why I don't like Gravity Pandemic that much is it's not my type of game. And you have said you are a sucker for abstracts. I don't know.
Yeah.
It might just be as simple as I like this type of game. I don't like this other type.
Yeah, and I do think the elegance of Mitosis once again really speaks to me.
That is true. Gravity Pandemic is not that elegant, I will say.
Yeah, like there's a lot of moving pieces in Gravity Pandemic, and that's part of its charm. But I don't know, just coming up with a new abstract that you can describe in like 2 sentences that's wholly original is, I think, a feat that has to be rewarded. That's my personal take. But yeah, it's a really tough field for the best DM, in my opinion. And I wouldn't be upset or surprised if like 3 or 4 of these ended up winning. So honestly, there might be a tie.
Yeah, there might be.
All right, let's move on to Best New Player 2024. This is the best player who played for the first time this year, and I have to say, we have to pour one out for Juan, who had such an amazing run. He's undefeated. Well, okay, he lost to me, but he's undefeated. He hasn't been eliminated in a Genius Org yet, and he's not going to win this award, which I find frankly ridiculous.
Kind of ridiculous that Fruit is eligible. I get that, like, the terms were very much defined as you debuted in an org that ended in 2024, but like I still think it's it is kind of, I don't know.
It's really funny because Pengu started and ended a Genius Org before Fruit did, and so Pengu won the Best Player award last year, despite Fruit being the one who introduced him to the community.
Oh, it's really funny.
That's really funny.
But I do think this is Fruit's award to lose. He has a record of, 5-1 across orgs that ended this year. The first place, I think, speaks volumes. I think it is one of the greatest runs we've ever seen. And the 5th place run was also extremely good. He just runs into the brick wall that is Amaranth. Juan has had a really good run. First place in Gold's Genius Game, and obviously he is in finals in Contractual Obligation. Any other year, I think it's an easy Juan win.
I want to play devil's advocate here, because
right.
I do think spoilers for best player, I do think Fruit takes it, but for best new player, like, I think his ZGD run didn't. Well, okay, wait, no, I'm stupid. I was like, his ZGD run didn't count for fucking 2024. It did. No, I don't know, he didn't. I feel like it's weird with Fruit just because Fruit's run as a new player entirely happened in 2023, and it was only not eligible for 2023 because the org vote did not end in 2023. But I feel it's weird because, like, you guys seem to be judging Fruit's play made in 2024, but the time period of when Fruit should be eligible happened in 2023, if that makes any sense. And so for me, like, I kind of feel like I should be judging, like, for this category of best new player, I should be judging just based off of Fruit's first year playing, which happened only on vote. He also got eliminated on 2023. I checked December 8th, I think. Something like that. He started and ended his run in 2023.
Yeah.
So I just feel like that's his first year playing the Genius. That's when he was a quote-unquote new player. I think I'm only counting Fruit's vote run just for this category. Where it's like something for like best player period, I would consider his Guardians run. One also technically started in 2023, but the org started December 24th, 2023. You know, like, it's just a week, and he ended in 2024. But also just consider, like, if I'm taking one into account, I think I would count both his Gold's Genius Game and Contractual Obligation runs, just because that's his entire first year of Genius orgs happened in 2024, mostly. I don't know. I'd feel more comfortable voting Juan for this category, but like for best player overall, I'd give it to Fruit.
I think the rules for this particular category should probably be changed in the future, where if a player gets eliminated before the org ends, they shouldn't get carried over to the following year.
Well,
because it doesn't really make sense.
It's weird because like the
issue is like if the org takes too long, you can't discuss it. You can't talk about it.
Yeah, okay, that's also fair.
If it's stuck in finals, that's one thing, but vote was not yet at finals. It was like stuck in
final 3.
Yeah, it was stuck in final 3, and it's like, yeah, we could probably talk about it, but it might inform like their item strategy or their DMO strategy. So
yeah,
it's just like a really tricky position. For what it's worth, I think I would have voted for Fruit last year if Fruit was eligible for best new player. I thought his one was really impressive. It is weird though that
I just think it's really hard to compare Fruit's vote run with Juan's GGG run, because I feel like the cast is completely different in terms of skill level, to be honest.
You're right there, but I think personally I feel you should be comparing Fruit's vote run with Juan's GGG and contractual obligation run.
Yeah, that's also
that's fair. I do think Juan's contractual obligation run is really good.
Yeah, it is very good. I think personally, I'm just gonna kind of consider it from the first 365 days that vote started, which includes a very, very large chunk of ZGD, where he played very impressively in the early game as well.
That's also a fair way to do it. It's also just kind of
it's arbitrary,
hard, but that's also fair.
Do we want to give quick shout outs to anyone else?
Yeah, I personally think we should give a shout out to the Gambit Game folk. I do think Alex played an extremely good game. He had a bit of a rough start, but he was really able to find his footing, and the duo between him and Nolux did run the game pretty strongly throughout the mid game. They clutched up a ton of main match wins, and Alex did end up making it all the way to finals. I thought his run was extremely impressive for someone who isn't familiar with the Genius or anything adjacent to that. And I also thought Joey's run was very good. He had some really good plays in the late game that propelled him to a very strong third place finish. It just so happens that it's a good category. There's a lot of nominees, but there is one person overshadowing everyone.
Yeah. And I'll also give a shout out to David, who I think is a very, very good player, just isn't as calculating as one needs to be in order to have an extremely dominating run. He's just too kind of a person.
He's nice
for that. He's too nice for it. He's too good for this world.
He's too good for Genius Circs. No, I really loved watching David play. I thought he was a joy to watch because
he's so good.
Yeah, he's just really nice, and he does the Whimzilla thing where he like writes out really detailed things. He makes these like nice spreadsheets. Just really fun, you know?
And he, on top of all that, he's Worm Elite.
Yeah, I mean, I think this category usually ends up being dominated by someone. I think last year was the first time we had like an actual debate between 2 or 3 different people, between some of the Heaven and Hell new folk, and then of course like Pengu and Tog, who both ended up co-winning the award. While I think in years past it was always pretty obvious who was gonna win. It was Amaranth 2 years ago, and then it was me 3 years ago, and then it was Uri 4 years ago. I don't think many of those were up for debate, so I think this year is probably gonna follow in that. Lots of great new players this year, so that's good to see. Let's move on to something we maybe spoiled a little bit. Best player 2024.
Fruit.
Yeah, I think it's Fruit.
I do think it's Fruit. I think it's really weird because there's a long list of people here. And there's probably like maybe 3 people it really should be. But even from those 3 people, it's like maybe one person who really deserves to win. Probably like a few more deserving nominees. But yeah, I think it is Fruit. Do we want to talk about the other runs a little bit though? The ones we think are deserving of at least a mention?
Yeah, I can go top down from the ones that I think should be mentioned.
Go for it.
Amaranth, obviously, won votes, had a very good run of DMs, and also won finals without dropping a game. Very impressive. I just think he kind of hurt his social positioning really early on unnecessarily by getting on the bad side of Fruit and David during MM1. There are obviously some, I guess, meta considerations as for how his social position was hurt, I think, because, you know, a lot of people recognized that he had won 3 Genius Orgs previously. So at least in my case, like, I can definitely say that, you know, that kind of like probably caused some apprehension in me. But after a certain point, I just feel like the divide between Fruit and David and Amaranth was like so set that Amaranth's social position for the rest of the game was just always going to be poor. And that did end up creating the need to DM run to F2. Moving on, Alara dominated a lot of ZGD. She had maybe like one slip up where Eden ended up DMOing her, and that DM was also very swingy. But aside from that, I really think she controlled most of that game, and just her game kind of fell apart in finals. Happens to the best of us. Fruit, I mentioned, we all mentioned him before. He's going to be our pick for this. I'll get back to him in a bit. But the final one I think that should be mentioned is probably your game, Mercer from CO. I felt like your social positioning was fairly exposed, but that never really hurt your ability to win main matches, aside from the one in which you were EC and possibly the penultimate episode, which I am less familiar with.
Yeah,
I just think it's like very, very dominant MM runs.
Yeah.
And also pretty solid DM performances as well.
The final episode, I was definitely exposed. It kind of transformed into a 4v1, partially because I was the only person who had 2 lives. But that was also somewhat by design. I wanted Juan to like kind of fearmonger that, because our play was that like I would take the DMs because I'm not in danger of dying while he gets to kind of go by scot-free. So it was by intent. And then they kind of fucked up their own plan. I remember they were trying to force EC me, but they failed, so they had to DMO me instead, and then that DMO advantage ended up mattering in the deathmatch, in my opinion, so yeah.
Which DM did y'all play?
Chromatic Collapse.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think I had a pretty good run, but I don't think it's my best run. I think it's probably my worst one, actually, out of the 3.
I think it's better than GG4.
Maybe.
But it's about the same.
Yeah, it's about the same. I think it has a very similar through line.
I felt like you were similarly exposed in GG4. You ate the wiki DM, but like that didn't end up mattering.
Yeah. Just
kind of similar punishment, I guess. Tempo Up is obviously the most elegant one.
Yeah. But what I was trying to say is I don't think it matters, because I think Fruit's run is so overpoweringly dominant.
Yeah, first run is goated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We can take some time here, but I think it's just a masterpiece of social positioning. And I think the important thing is, like, when I play often, my social positioning, except in Tempo Up, is generally pretty exposed. People know where I am, and also that I am generally the top threat. I think Fruit did a really good job of having connections with pretty much everyone on the cast without really letting anyone know that he was the central social force of that game. I think he was able to offload a lot of that kind of, that role to both Cake.
I think threat perception.
I mean, I think it is threat perception, because I think in the early game, he was kind of able to sell, or this angle that like Cake and Sean and these other people were the major alliance threat. And then he pivoted to like Toby being a threat, and also kind of using... And Uri, right? And using his F2 as kind of a shield, being like, oh, he's actually the one who's in control of everything. And it worked out, because he was basically putting Uri as this like scapegoat when he was actually the one who was reporting everything to Uri, so the two of them could craft pretty much the perfect social narrative the entire game. And he was able to carry that momentum all the way to finals, right? I think it really speaks volumes that he was going to win items against pretty much everyone, and dominantly so. I think he was never in danger of losing finals, maybe against Uri. But like Dem's being 9-2'd or whatever doesn't really speak to Dem's game. It really speaks to Fruit's game, and how pretty much everybody thought really highly of Fruit before their elimination. And even after their elimination.
No, they all hated Dems.
And And even after their elimination, I think a lot of people felt like, wow, I gotta give this guy props, right? Like, he never made one incorrect move. You can, like, nitpick. You can be like, oh, obviously, you know, he made a few mistakes. He didn't win a few main matches because he misunderstood a few rules. There was that blunder in Final 3, but pretty much a seamless run. And, you know, it just, I don't know. There's not much I can say about it because it's so perfect. It really felt like one of the ideal Genius runs of all time, right?
Fruit is in session.
Yeah, poor Dams.
Yeah, I don't really have too much to add to that. I just remember checking in like periodically to see how Fruit and Uri were doing, and they were always like chilling. So I was just like, go them. I'm happy. I'm happy for them.
Yeah.
And then I think there was definitely a turning point where, you know, we speak about Fruit as though he was like consistently on top the entire game. And, you know, he was never really in any danger. But I do think Uri had a slightly better position than he did. And I think the turning point was around, I think like MM6, MM7, where I thought to myself, yeah, okay, Fruit has the best position in the game. And that just carried on all the way to F3.
I agree. I think Uri also had an extremely strong social run, and you know, it's pretty sad that we weren't able to see them face off in finals. I do agree with Jackson. I think early game Uri had a really strong social positioning, mainly because he was the only connecting link to PRCS. And it gives Uri like a lot of control when Uri is able to be the reliable communicator to the chaos factor in a game like this, and also the guy who ended up like being DMO'd a million times, right? But I think what ended up happening was PRCS ended up getting eliminated, and also the other thing is Fruit was able to strike up stronger relationships with both Toby and Shard than Uri was able to, and basically it ended up being closer to kind of a middle late game where Fruit was the connecting node between everyone, kind of against Uri. He was able to frame Uri as quote-unquote the big bad and use that to fuel his own game.
PRCS Uri also weakened too. I should bring that up.
I agree. I think Uri pretty intentionally distanced himself from PRCS after a while. And Uri also wasn't able to... I mean, I think partially it is that the relationships Uri was fostering ended up dying slightly earlier. I remember Uri and Cake used to talk a lot, but also Cake and Fruit talked a lot. Like, both of them were in alliances. I think actually Cake and Fruit was far stronger than Uri Cake.
Yeah, it was.
I think at some point it just turned. I think it's hard to pinpoint a specific moment, but like I blinked and it's like episode 8 and Fruit is the one who's talking between 5 people and being like, oh, I'm scared of Uri, like, oh, he's gonna beat us all. And being able to successfully, you know, sell that act to everyone was really good, me personally. Yeah. I think he deserves the best player title. I think it deserves to be recognized as one of the greatest runs. And I mean, obviously the best player award also takes into consideration his other run. And like, yes, he did lose, and yes, it was still a really good run, but I do think the ZGD run just overshadows everything. I don't even think the vote run is really much consideration, and even if it was, it is a really good run still. So I don't know if you have anything to add, X.
No, I think you summed it up perfectly.
Do we want to do any other shouts for this one? Okay. Guess not.
I mean, I think Grunkle played well.
Yeah.
I think obviously Grunkle, the Grunkle run, I think a lot of people think of it as an asterisk because he did lose and come back and then win. And also he was a bit of a he did lose like every main match, but
yeah,
his DM performance was strikingly good. It was probably some of the best performances I've ever seen. And he was able to carry that momentum all the way into finals. And I think he's definitely the deserving winner of Gambit Game. Deserves to be mentioned. I liked Lettle's Nilnot run. I think it was good. I don't know if it's best player material, but I thought he was pretty well socially positioned. Perhaps you could say his run was worm-like, a little bit, perhaps, you know, seeking to survive day by day.
We're really like spreading the worm propaganda.
Yeah.
You could say his run was worm-like, but it was, you know, I would say Lettle was worm elite, so.
Worm elite.
So I think it was a good run. Best org cast 2024. The org with the best cast this year.
All right. I think for non-live, it's definitely Nolnada. That cast is just exceptionally stacked.
I agree.
I agree.
But how does Gambit Game compare?
I don't think Gambit Game compares.
I am a big fan of Gambit Game, but I was very much more invested into the cast of Nolnada. I think there were can I say this? There were a few duds in in the cast of Gambit Game. Well, I can say this actually.
I mean, there were quits, like
there
were 2 quits.
I just yeah.
No, I'm in agreement here. I think the quits do weigh heavily on Gambit Game's cast. I do think the cast that, you know, kind of is able to be there for the mid game and late game are fantastic, right? I think episode 5 onwards is a very, very strong showing from pretty much everyone involved. Everyone in Gambit Game has a moment.
Yeah.
And I think that's really strong. But the consistency and the overall level of threats in Nolnada, probably one of the strongest casts we've ever seen.
Yeah, I just think Gambit Game is like top heavy, whereas like Nolnada is like heavy pretty much almost everywhere across the board.
Guys, like Kate got like what, 9th in this org or something? 8th?
Yeah,
this is a damn good player. Like, she's never gotten anything below like 5th place other than Trophy Game, and she goes out.
Trophy Game does not count as the host of that game. Do not count Trophy Game.
And like she's such a solid player. She's fantastic. She's obviously a previous winner, amazing at the Genius, and she died in 8th. And you know, Zatchel died in what, like 10th, 11th? That's another fantastic player.
Yeah.
You know, Scarlet goes out early.
10th, yeah.
Just from top to bottom, excellence from everyone involved. X gives me so much shit for failing to balance the orgs.
yeah, I was just like, why put all the good people in Nolnada, and then like Nolnada just has like a handful of good people.
I can't really talk shit though, because I remember when CHGG3 happened, and I just like failed to intervene when the splits were brought. Oh no, CHGG2, my bad.
Yeah.
When the splits were brought up.
I protested those splits. Those splits I did protest, and they were hurt to deaf ears.
That was atrocious. That was
I was like, guys, I really don't think this should be the split, and I think I was just nobody listened.
CHGG2 was weird because like the initial split just looked wrong, but we were told there'd be swaps. So then I was like, fuck it, I'll just hands off. I don't feel like putting the energy into this. They're swapping anyway. They only swapped one person per episode, basically.
Yeah.
It was not right.
Yeah.
I will say, to defend my performance here, when I split Guardians, the priority was actually pregame. Like, obviously I could, if it was purely skill level, I think I could have pretty perfectly balanced that. The issue was like, for example, Fruit and Dems were always going to play together because both of them could not be cast with Pengu, for example, right? So that was the first priority. And then after I figured out all the pregame issues, then we could start thinking about like skill swaps. And it turned out doing some of the skill swaps were very, very difficult without breaking the pregame stuff. Because that was what Zero wanted me to prioritize, and also what I felt was right to prioritize. I didn't want like Fruit and Pengu to be on the same side and just like, you know, pregame F2 or whatever. So that was what I prioritized. And I think in hindsight, there's a few swaps I could have made. I think I vastly overestimated how social certain people were going to be in Nilnot.
I think you definitely could have swapped Toby.
Yeah.
For any number of people on Nilnot.
I agree. I think Toby actually started on Nilnot. I think Toby had to be swapped for some other reason. And then the other thing that happened was there were 2 last-minute swaps. PRCS was originally on Nilnot.
That would have been so funny. you robbed us of an even better universe.
Okay,
I hope you know that. I hope you go to sleep at night.
Okay, I thought it would be funny too. I was like, okay, PRCS on this side, great content, especially with gold. I was like, I want to see them shit talk each other. I want to see Mist. I want to see the three of them interact. I don't know if I can say this, but around that time, I initially thought it was okay. I thought that was the perfect content balance. About a day before Guardian's server opened, PRCS got into a really big, severe argument with someone who was on that cast. And I went to Zero and said, I actually don't think we should do this. I think it is actually actively bad for both of their mental health if we do this. And I had to last minute switch out PRCS. And then switching out PRCS caused an issue, and I had to do another swap. I think I had to swap one of the Dosh people. I think I had to swap like Psalms and maybe Sean, I think, and I think that caused more imbalance. So there were some last minute snafus that made it even worse.
But that's also a large reason why Null Nada might sweep this award.
Yeah, it's true.
I do wonder what the world would have been if PRCS was kept in nil not, but
alas.
My bad, guys. My bad. I take that on my chest. I do think both orgs still played out well. I do think they played out well.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
It played out well.
Anyways, Nolnada probably has the best org cast. I think we are in unanimous agreement. All right, let's move on to the second to last award. Best host team of 2024. This is just the best hosting team. So any org that was hosted, who did we thought was the best hosting team of an org that was eligible?
You know, it's kind of weird because even though I am a huge vote stan and, you know, want to give a lot of awards to Sood, I think I vote Ian and Alara here, but I can't really articulate why. I just think they were both like such an effective pair. The graphics were amazing. I think just like as a finished product, CO has just like so much polish. It was just really nice.
I think the other thing is just they've hosted with each other so many times. I think they have it down to like a rhythm, and because of that, I think everything has a level of extra polish.
Yeah.
From knowing someone for that long, right? And they have like a design process that they know and they're familiar with, and I think it shows in terms of like we can sit here and be like some of the CO games were misses, but none of them were badly designed. All of them were playable, functional games that had a clear intent and motive and directed the gameplay in a certain direction. We can squabble about like how we felt about certain elements, whether they really were fun for us, but as products, it's highly polished, refined, right?
Yeah.
Also, I didn't do jack shit. I don't know.
Yeah, I wanted to be kind.
No. Here's the reason why I'm on this list. I'm on this list because someone specifically nominated Pseudo plus Marcer. Like, it was not Pseudo. Someone nominated Pseudo plus Marcer, and so we had to put my name here.
We should have put Scarlet with Ian and Alara.
I mean, honestly, at that point, right? So...
Yeah.
My contributions to vote are like 4 things. I actually I read the original proposal for the org before I left the community, like in 2022. And then when I came back, Pseudo added me to the hosting team to host a single main match. I wrote code for like 2 different main matches, and then I proofread every single rule set before it was sent out.
Okay, that's not jack shit, but I mean, it's mostly Sood. But
it's almost entirely Sood, yeah.
I will say, Ian and Alara, they design great games. There were a few decisions with controversial events that I didn't quite agree with, and for that reason, I don't know. I would rather vote Sam plus Gambit Game production team.
That's also valid, yeah.
I mean, I think they were just put between
they were put in
a rock and a hard place so many times.
Yeah.
And I just have a hard time blaming them for that. I mean, I was involved in some of this, so like, I just don't think it's fair for me to judge them for that. I think they did what they thought they had to, and we can say with hindsight, oh, that was probably a mistake or whatever, but yeah. I will say though, Sam and the Gambit Game production team definitely deserve a huge shout. Mostly Sam. Like, Sam ended up hard carrying that project through its editing phase. Early on, I think a lot of people were hands on deck. You know, Isa and I did a lot of the spreadsheeting behind the scenes. Reese did all the graphics. Maddie and Alex did a bunch of the dealing, and Uriquack moral support. He designed puzzles. He designed.
I love the pause. Like you actually thought about what he did, and you decided he did nothing.
Yeah.
And he has caught quite a few strays in this podcast, and this one's just a nail in the coffin.
No, that was not a stray. That was like
No.
No, it was not a stray. It was a sniper bullet. Like, he knew what he was doing.
I think he helped with the puzzles. Like there were puzzles multiple times that he helped design, especially the observation puzzles. I think he will be the first one to admit he didn't really do much, to be fair.
That's true.
I mean, after the initial recording phase, a lot happened, and Sam ended up having to edit, pretty much every episode except I think like 2.5. I did a little bit of work for episode 1, but really not that much. I think maybe like 10% of the work, and then I obviously edited all of episode 9 by myself. And then I think there's an episode in there that Alex did. I'm not entirely sure, but every other episode was Sam sitting at his computer for hours on hours, editing, compiling, compressing, figuring out everything, storyboarding. And I've got to say, there were some delays, there were some issues, but overall the final product is wonderful, is fantastic.
So Gambit Game 2 when?
I think Sam doesn't really want to do it. I think it was a lot.
Yeah. So when are we forcing Sam to do it again?
I think if we were to do it again, and I say we, but it's mostly Sam, I think we would probably have to have like a stronger editing schedule and like timeline. Maybe even hire an editor, right?
Yeah.
Like, because the recording, the live session, that stuff was all really smooth, and we knocked it out in like 2 months, like not 2 months, like 3 or 4 months. Really good pace. It's just the editing took forever, and so like I think Sam at some point threw out the idea of like maybe we hire like an editing team to handle that part for us, because like we are much better at the hosting side just because we are Genius Org hosts. That part a lot of us have experience with, but the editing I think stalled for a while.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I would be the first to say I would love to see a Gambit Game 2. I think there's so much potential for cool games, cool moments, and I also love editing. Like I would be willing to edit. It's just the there's just some stuff that happened that made it difficult to continue with the project.
Yeah. And obviously Zero is also a force. I really like how
that she does like this shit like on her own completely.
Yeah. It's wild.
And always crazy ideas that are like well polished, all these graphics, a lot of work. It's like ridiculous to me because she'll write all these crazy main matches, and then she'll write like software, like Excel sheets that like automate the main matches. And when she can't, she'll sit there and process the main match for hours. Like that is a level of dedication that I think is just extremely impressive,
Yeah, I think purely on an impressiveness standpoint, I think like Zero is like near the top, if not the top. But like I think she's hindered by some misses on her games.
And there's no I in team. She's the only so on that list.
She has solo hosted for her entire career. Everybody else has transitioned to be like, we need a team, and she's like, nah, I'd win.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's crazy though.
I think all of these are incredibly good hosting teams.
Yeah, I agree.
I think everybody did a fantastic job this year. I thought a lot of it's been 10 years of the community, and we've come a long way from hosts like forgetting rules or scrapping rules or doing crazy things, abandoning orgs. Stuff like that doesn't really happen anymore. I wouldn't be surprised if any of these people won. I actually, frankly, don't really know where my vote is going right now. I might end up voting for... maybe I'll just vote for all of them. Maybe I'll just submit it.
Yeah, I think you might as well vote for none of them by that point.
Yeah, but I want the numbers to go up.
Oh, yeah,
I want them all to know fair. I supported them. You want to move on to the final award, the big one?
Sure.
Yep.
Best Org 2024. Just the best. This one's hard. This one's really tough.
Really hard.
I think overall, I'm not gonna like think of like quality or like best game design or best cast. I'm just gonna think of what gave me the most enjoyment, and I just think that's Gambit Game.
That's fair.
I'm just gonna be simple-minded
Totally
on this big one.
I think maybe we should just walk through them one by one and just say our thoughts out loud. And first one on the list is Gambit Game, which X brought up. I think Gambit Game is such a labor of love.
I agree.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it shows in every part of it.
It's a very ambitious project, and it also, I think, it's also kind of like, on a personal level, I just feel it came out during a time where I couldn't play Genius Orgs, and when I was in the army, and I had limited access to the internet. Like every episode that came out every week, like I just looked forward to it. I had something to look forward to in those like very like lonely, dark times. I don't want to say dark, but incredibly lonely times where I had nothing to do and so little time to do things that I wanted to do.
Soldiers get letters from home. You had your Gambit Game videos.
XNimus gets Gambit Game. It just really brightened like that part of my life. Whereas like watching No Not and No Nada and variations on the theme, like it's hype. When you see like the results and stuff, I don't think it hits quite the same.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just from a production standpoint, obviously Gambit Game is such a home run, right?
Yeah.
And it delivers. I think best org is difficult this year because every org excels at something different.
Yeah.
And what you choose as best org depends on what you think best means in this context, right? Gambit Game is probably some of the most fun I had. Like even as production, right? I had such fun making that org, and I had such fun watching it come out week by week. It's just really great. You can tell Sam poured so much of his soul and heart and time into it, and also that a lot of the players really, really cared, right? You could tell everybody is playing their ass off on screen, and I think it makes for a product where that feels genuinely like heartwarming at the end of the day.
Yeah, I wish I had anything to add to that, but I don't.
Yeah. And then we move on to like variations on a theme, right? Which is the second org on this list. And that is also a labor of love. I personally know that's an org that Pseudo has carefully designed for years, pretty much since Genius Game 4 ended, probably halfway through Genius Game 4, if we're being honest. He collected all of his ideas and he basically set out on creating a magnum opus, some org that he wanted to represent as his own, because Genius Game 4 is kind of a collaborative product. And I think you can tell how much care and effort and thought he put into every single game. And I mean, we've already sung our praises about the game design. It's a fantastic org in terms of game design. Probably one of the best we've ever seen in terms of consistent quality. I'm sure, Jackson, you probably have more to say about it.
Yeah, so I have been playing orgs on and off or Genius Org specifically, on and off since 2017. Nothing has come as close to like replicating that experience of play, like the level of enjoyment, the level of, I guess, just like complexity with the games as my first. Nothing's come as close to that first experience as Vote. Really, like I played Tabula Rasa in 2017. The games were kind of jank, to be honest, but I had an incredible time. Vote is the only thing that has come close to it, if not surpassing it. Just an incredible game. It will be earning my vote, but I do have to say that, like, as a spectator experience, it was really bad for several different reasons. It should definitely sweep the consistently good design, but I feel like, a game where like 3 people quit is just not like a great bow to put on the present that is Vote, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's 2. But yeah.
No, it's 3 because I think it's 2 quits and a sub, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
ABC, Cam, and Andy. Oh wait, no, 4 because of Lee.
Oh, oof, yeah.
Yeah, that early game was rough.
I agree.
So bad. I felt so bad for Sood.
I did. He was having a really rough time.
But the rest of the game was a fucking slam dunk. So, honestly, props.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, as someone who was in the back rooms, I think Suda was having a hard time. I think he was pretty mentally out of it just because I think it hurts when you see something you poured so much effort into and all these people just drop like flies. But what we were able to get was still like fantastic. Like once we got past the troublesome quits, we ended up getting some of the greatest moments and greatest games in Genius history. Like Amaranth versus David, we're going to talk about for years, you know?
Yeah.
We're probably also going to talk about Amaranth versus Fruit for a very long time, just because, especially with the benefit of hindsight, right? How important that was.
Yeah, for sure.
And obviously, amazing games. We got Worm tier list. We got Shooting Mangoes and Monkeys. We got He Plays League of Legends. Let's just put it like that.
Yeah, God, such a good org.
Yeah. I honestly, I would not be surprised if Vote won this award either. It's such a labor of love. It's fantastic all the way throughout, and I think it is, we've already talked about this, it's clearly the best designed org of the year, and I don't know if it's particularly close for me personally, and I don't say that lightly. Next up is one of the Zero's Guardians. We're going to start with Nil Not first, and I think Nil Not is a fascinating spectator experience in contrast to like what we just said about Vote. Vote had a bit of a rough patch at the start. I think Nil Not was chaos from day one.
From the beginning.
Yeah, and it was chaos all the way through. In large part due to its cast and a lot of the ways in which they led and played the game, right?
Yeah, I feel like Nil Not is in some sense a polar opposite, as you mentioned, just because I feel like the spectator experience was easily the best from this year of the non-live games. That MM3 was something else. In Nil Not, with Gold trying and failing to win immediately. Just so good.
In Gold we trust.
In Gold we trust.
And like I think the other part about that episode is we assign so much importance to like Gold and Ilara, but the amount of like bounce off of that from the rest of the cast is also amazing. Like the way Lettle was making jokes about it, Wimp making memes, Pumble being like, oh, I'm gonna use this to my advantage to force my EC or whatever the fuck he ended up doing in that episode. And then there's just like Wims being like, I have no idea what the fuck is going on, but I think I did well. Like, just fascinating from everyone involved. Like, such a treat to watch. Obviously, game design was rough at times, and at times, you know, it struggled with some momentum, but man, it was, you know, I could always check in to an unread message in Nil Not and almost guarantee some crazy shit was going on, you know?
Yeah.
So, just fascinating. Just total treat. And I think Nul Nada is just such a strong cast, and I think, like, obviously at times it wasn't as funny and it didn't have the chaos factor, but as a pure like game of strategy, a pure game of social strategy between all these different incredibly strong players, it was always a total game of chess, always super interesting and engaging. All the different ways different players were moving and wanting to move, and the way they were directing the currents. It was extremely elaborate, always super engaging and fun to watch. And I think overall, like, the gameplay quality, the way these games played out was better in Nul Nada. Like, it was more socially dynamic, especially in the early game. I think later on, it was kind of a fruit stomp. But I just remember, especially like main match 1, main match 2, and main match 3, there was so much talking going on across all these different alliances, all these different people with different agendas and different things they wanted to accomplish and different people they wanted to target. And it was, you know, I had to write like paragraphs upon paragraphs to try to understand like what exactly people were trying to do and where they were lying and not lying in pair chats. It was, yeah, I don't know. It's a type of fun I haven't had in a Genius org in a long time, where like just following along all the trickery was genuinely exciting.
solid summation. Yeah, I don't really think I have anything else to add to that.
I wish I had something else to add.
Yeah, no.
I mean, I think overall, also like the Zero's Guardians games, they don't live up to the highs. They don't live up to the consistency of Vote, obviously. But I do think there were some really strong games in there. And I think they allowed their players to shine. So it's not like these are badly designed orgs, not even close to it, right? All of them are just labors of immense amounts of love. Like all of these orgs, it's really funny. All of these orgs have been in the works for multiple years.
Yeah.
Right? Guardians has been in the works since Gauntlet ended. Probably since before then, if we're being real, right? Variations on a theme since 2021. Gambit Game, also a project that started in 2021. This is the era of orgs coming to life that have been hibernating for years, right? Magnum opuses.
I just want to put into perspective, like, Guardians was conceived before Marcer came to this community. That's crazy.
All right, crazy.
Yeah,
that is wild.
Yeah, that is crazy. And Gambit Game happened like, I think like 5 months into GG4, right? Like Sam was like, I'm looking for editors, and I was like, oh, I have editing experience. I've done video editing for some groups before. And Variations on a Theme also, since I was, since my first time playing, and that was a long time ago. To put into perspective, like Guardians is like a third of Gold's age. Unironically, probably.
That is crazy.
So yeah, I think all of these are deserving winners. I think we've talked about this at length outside of this recording as well. We could not come to a consensus. It's incredibly difficult to even say a favorite, in my opinion.
I mean, as I said earlier, I'll probably be voting for Vote, but if I had to pick a second place, it probably would be Gambit Game, just like due to the sheer number of hours that everyone had to pour into it, especially from Sam, in order to make it, a finished product, and a really fucking good product too, obviously.
Absolutely agreed. And that's all. I think 50 awards or 49 or something.
I think I want to say one thing about most innovative DM. I did end up changing my opinion. I am now putting down Gravity Pandemic.
The fuck?
You are free to end it now, Marcer.
We're gonna end it on a Gravity Pandemic shout out.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
Man, it's 10 years of Genius Orgs. This is the 10th year. Look at all these crazy shit we're coming up with, guys.
Crazy.
Like, I don't know what the fuck is gonna happen next year. I don't know. I think it's really funny because I have been looking at old games and old orgs a lot for the repository project. I remember going back to like Smog 1 and Genius Game 1 and looking at the games for those org and also the ways they were played. Very vaguely, because I don't have the IRC logs, but I do have like forum messages. And it's so crazy. We read from like, guys, this is rock, paper, scissors, except you can play 2 symbols, to like, you need 13 calculators and like 4 different people on this 24/7 to make the optimal move.
I love how the height and complexity is still Smog 2. And we'll never go back to that.
No. I've been
Nah.
telling people about this. Guys, if you think this shit is complicated, like, I think people look at stuff like Prepare or Despair, or what else was pretty complicated this year, or like Essential Escape or whatever, and they're like, wow, that's so complex. Guys, you don't understand. There was an entire simulation of the United States election in Smogon 2. And I am not joking. These people had to campaign in all 50 different states, and each state had its own like population, votes, voting issues. Fucking crazy. And then there was an entire main match that was just Age of Empires.
The games were so complex that the players organized a grassroots revolution against it. Like, until your Genius org does that, I don't want to hear it.
I mean, I think we've settled on... I think there was a few years back where the complexity got pretty bad, But I think we've settled on a decent level of complexity. I think people have kind of figured out what the right amount of complexity and innovation is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it shows because we've had some really elegant designs this year. Okay, I guess we cut.